Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode in the series Dawah Ilallah, as we start to investigate the comparative sciences. So welcome all our international guests from all over the world who have chosen to be with us today. So many things that we could have been doing, but you've chosen to learn a little bit more about how to be effective in calling people to submit to Allah. And we've been looking in the series so far at church doctrines. These are the teachings that Christians follow that they believe come from the Bible. But in fact, they do not. Oftentimes when we debate or question or speak to Christians, we attack the text. And so we use defending Islam from the text. We go to the text and say, what about this verse? It contradicts, whatever. That's the normal way we've been doing things. I believe that perhaps we've been doing it the wrong way around. Maybe we should be trying to show them, instead of the contradictions, that the doctrines have nothing to do with the text. That the doctrines were created by men, and in that way create the doubt. But if we look at these doctrines, we so far looked at the idea of praying to Jesus. Christians believe that praying to Jesus must be a biblical doctrine, must be from the Bible. But we've seen a number of verses that we looked at, won't go through all of them again, that it's not something that Jesus taught. That it was something that he said, do not pray to me, but pray to God. So we looked at how this is a tradition, a doctrine that was in existence before the text was even written. Therefore, it wasn't the text that taught people how to do this, but it was customs and traditions of the day. The next thing we looked at is the definition of the Holy Trinity according to Christianity. What their definition was, what they say it meant, and how the text or the references to where they found this were only looked for 1,000 years later. It was only 1,400 years after the doctrine of the Trinity was in existence that somebody thought, ooh, maybe we should find a verse that backs up this doctrine. That was the first time anyone even looked for it. Then we looked at the idea that many Christians hold to the fact that the Bible is alone, that it stands alone for time. And then we looked and we found that nowhere does the Bible even claim that. And in fact, the Bible says there were other books written, that there were other texts written. In fact, when we looked at 2 Thessalonians, where it said that there were other oral traditions and other oral written texts that should be listened to and followed, and when you hear them, follow them. So there is no evidence anywhere in the pages of the known Bible that we have pre-modern times or modern times where it even identifies itself as the only text. In fact, we find the exact opposite. So this is again a doctrine that is unbiblical, is not based on anything to be found in the Bible. The whole modern Christian belief system, where we looked at of having different groups all on their way to pleasing God, is unbiblical, not permissible. There can only be one church, one right church. So if there are 30,000 Christian denominations, according to the text, 29,999, whatever it is, are all wrong. Only one is correct. So the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists and the Mormons were correct when they said only one can be right. All the rest are wrong because the biblical narrative says so. So you've got to choose. Listen to the lie of the denominations or believe the text. One is right, the other one is wrong, or they're both wrong. Today we're going to be looking at the next doctrine. This is a juicy one. This is one that's going to get the most people upset. And that is the message of marriage as found in church doctrine opposed to what is found in the text. The doctrine of somebody who gets married and then decides no longer to be married. More than 60% of Americans claim to be born-again Christians, claim to be God-fearing, God-loving, Bible thumpers who will not do anything that the Bible does claim that they should be doing. Yet these same people do not realize that their doctrine on divorce is not biblical. It is nowhere to be found permissible in the pages of the Bible from Genesis to Revelations. Yet they accept it widely as God-fearing, abortion clinic blow-uppers that it is acceptable to be divorced and remarry, which is totally unbiblical, not to be found anywhere in the pages of the Bible. It is another one of those doctrines. It is a non-biblical teaching, not to be found anywhere. Now, many modern Christians in society today, 99% again, almost all of them, the only church that remotely speaks against the idea of remarrying someone once they're divorced, and not all of those within this group, only one out of all the 30,000 different groups, Catholicism, is the only one that speaks against remarrying divorced people. But even they are compromising these days. What they do is they can annul your marriage. They can say your first marriage wasn't really a proper marriage, and they can annul it. In other words, they can make it as if it never happened in the eyes of God. But if we think about the concept of divorce, what do you hear when you have a church service? What happens? In a church service, the priest will stand here, and the bride and the groom and the witnesses will be there, and the congregation is there, and the doors must be open so he can run out or she can run out if they change their minds. No, the runaway bride, runaway groom, they can run away if they want to. And the priest will get them to put their hands together, and he'll take a ring and he'll exchange rings, and he says, what God has joined together, let no man tear asunder. That is before God. You're making a promise before the Almighty that whoever God has joined together, not even a human being in the whole of the planet can pull apart. You made a promise. Is divorce acceptable? Can there be divorce? According to Christianity, not acceptable. So this is a doctrine, not a teaching of the Bible. Now, where do we get this from? When we look at the teaching of the church, it is unbiblical, not to be found anywhere. It is a tradition of man, and it is anti-biblical. Nowhere do we find anywhere that it is permissible in the pages of the Bible for someone to remarry. It is an idea that was only invented for the very, very first time in the 16th century. The first time that anyone even mentioned someone being permitted to be remarried after they were divorced. 16th century, 1,600 years after Jesus. Do we hear the first time that somebody is permitted to be divorced and remarry? And so it says in Mark chapter 10 and verse 9. Mark chapter 10 and verse 9. And therefore what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. So very, very clear that no man will ever be able to separate these people. Only God himself, according to the Christian text, would be able to do that. And another verse which we find as well, it says, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. This we can look at Luke chapter 16, verse 18. So when we look at Mark chapter 10, verse 9, and we look at Luke 16, verse 17, does it give there any chance for you to remarry? What happens? According to the text, if you divorce your wife and you remarry, both of you commit adultery, and the partner that they both married have committed adultery. And what is the penalty for adultery? According to the Bible, not according to what Islam believes. Stoning to death immediately. Now we are going back to the divorce story. So nowhere in the Bible or even in the early church do we read that this is an acceptable practice. Was never permitted. Even the Protestants, because some people say, well, what about the Catholics had that as a doctrine, but we as Protestants, we don't have that. They didn't even practice it for a long period of time. Only one person was allowed this divorce to happen, which we will deal with later. So it wasn't allowed, it was not condoned, it was not accepted. So all the Protestant denominations used to be against this. Even the reformers of the Protestant movement, all were against this, right up to about 16th century. So when did this all change? Does anybody here know? Before you answer that question, let's take a break. When we get back from the break, we'll continue, inshallah.
confused, worried, losing control. If you are a parent, these feelings may well be all too familiar. In a society in which we increasingly feel that we are losing our children, it's still possible to get it right. And Islam will show you how. Want to know more? Join me, Muhammad Tim Humble, as we explore the ways to be a good Muslim parent.
Learn a series of beautiful Islamic techniques to help our children get the best in this world and the best in the hereafter in 26 Ways to be a Good Muslim Parent. Every Friday at 6 p.m. and repeat telecast at 5:30 a.m. UK on Peace TV. Dialogue. Discussion, debate, rebuttal, conclusion.
Eliminate misconceptions about religion. Get enlightened.
Witness Dr. Zakir Naik in a battle of words in Crossfire every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 12:30 p.m. UK on Peace TV. Courage it takes to stand up for what you believe in. Courage it takes to be true and righteous. Courage it takes to dare and answer your questions, be they social, political, economic, educational, or religious. To get clear and convincing answers,
Test your courage and question me in Dare to Ask.
Dare to Ask, next on Peace TV.
If I were to ask you about the life of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, about the incidents that occurred before his prophethood and in Mecca and in Medina, about the names of his loved ones and his wives and his children, how much would we be able to know? How many incidents have we memorized? Brothers and sisters, isn't it more important that we study the seerah of the most important human being who ever walked the face of this earth? Join me, your host Yasir Qadhi, as we discuss the most important biography of the most illustrious human being that ever lived, the seerah of our beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Join Yasir Qadhi in Seerah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, every Monday at 3:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 2 a.m. UK on Peace TV.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And continue with the episode that we are dealing with about Christian doctrine. 99% of Christians in the world believe that their doctrine comes from the Bible. We have found extremely important doctrines, that these doctrines are nowhere to be found in the Bible. First, the doctrine was created, and then the biblical text looked for hundreds or even thousands of years later to substantiate this belief. So all the Protestant denominations used to be against this. Even the reformers of the Protestant movement, all were against this, right up to about 16th century. So when did this all change? So we are looking now at divorce, the most contentious issue of the day in the society we live. But according to Christianity, according to the biblical text, it is not acceptable. In fact, if you divorce, you're not permitted to remarry. You have to stay single for the rest of your life. And if you marry a divorced person, you've committed adultery. And we all know that the consequences, according to the New Testament, by Jesus himself, when he meets an adulterous woman, they wanted to stone her. So we know the story, that was the penalty for it. The consequence of remarrying is stoning to death. Still in the 21st century, not until heaven and earth pass away, it says in the Bible, not until heaven and earth pass away, one dot or one tittle of this word be changed. So according to the Bible, If you remarry anybody after you've been divorced, you have committed adultery and you are guilty and you need to be killed. You need to be stoned to death. This is not what we say, it's what your text is saying. So Jesus himself says not a single word will change until heaven and earth pass away. Has anybody seen heaven and earth pass away in the last 2,000 years? Has it happened? Maybe I haven't been told about the heaven and earth passing away. Maybe I missed it. Maybe it was one of those Jehovah's Witness prophecies that never took place. But until that day, Jesus, according to the Bible, says not a single word, not a single dot, not even a comma will change. So therefore, the penalty of death is still upon you if you divorce. So now, the question is, what was the reason that the early church allowed divorce into the church? Remember, before this, no one was allowed to get divorced. What was the reason that suddenly the Protestants, in the 16th century, something happened, an event happened that said, fine, now you can get divorced?
Sheikh, I think it was Henry VIII, the King of England, and he wanted to remarry or something to that effect.
You see, the Protestant church was against divorce, except for King Henry VIII, as you correctly said. King Henry VIII was a man who wanted to divorce his wife and remarry. In fact, he got to a point where he didn't even bother divorcing them, he just killed them. And he had 6 wives. So this man was a serial remarrier, well, if there's such a term. So it's strange that when they broke this rule of allowing remarriage, we find that the whole Catholic Church actually pulled out of the country. England lost Catholicism because of divorce. So they left and it became the Church of England. That's where it became the Protestant church, through divorce. And then it became more and more popular. And so we see in society today, the church, even the priests, even the pastors, even the bishops and deacons can be divorced. Yet it is clearly taught in the pages of the Bible that that person is not allowed. Okay, so if we look at Christianity, we find that many of the doctrines that they have are not from the biblical text itself. And when we look at divorce, this is one of the issues that is the most important for people to understand, is that it became popularized. And today we find more and more modern, scholars, Christian scholars, modern pastors. They even, maybe it's their second or third wife already they've had divorce and they're in leadership positions. This is not permissible. You can go through the book of Corinthians, where it talks about what type of people should be in leadership, what type of gifts will be given, the responsibility of the church. And we see that this is forbidden. Yet they have these positions of power. I remember even in the 80s, it was unheard of in the 1980s for a deacon or a bishop to be in control of a church or to be divorced. You weren't even eligible. Now it's common practice. So even in my city where I live, in South Africa, about 10, 20 kilometers from where I live, there is a very big spirit church. You know, one of these churches, Holy Spirit movement churches. They ignore the Bible, they ignore doctrine, they're just led by the Spirit wherever He leads them. They have as one of their deacons, one of their spiritual leaders in their church. It's a woman who is a prostitute, practicing prostitute. She sells her body for a living, but she holds a position in the church as a church leader. This is how far the church has gone away from its original message. So you find that many, many doctrines, teachings on the Bible are now just ignored totally. They're all on their own mission, doing their own thing. And this is the sad state of affairs within Christianity. And people are holding, maybe there are 21 beliefs of your Christian denomination that you have to accept to be part of that Christian denomination. And we find that people, many of those people in those denominations, only holding to 5 or 6 of those. The rest they know to be fake, yet they still stay in that denomination. How can you do that? Think about the Seventh-day Adventist for a moment. A Seventh-day Adventist will only remain a Seventh-day Adventist if he keeps the Sabbath, which is a Saturday, and that he remains a member of that denomination. If he leaves that denomination and had to go to the Baptist or the Anglican or Methodist or Presbyterian, the church would say he has lost his salvation. But there are church members in the Seventh-day Adventist church when they can't find a Seventh-day Adventist church, will go to the Anglican or Methodist or Presbyterian or Baptist church. And when you ask them, why did you do that? Doesn't your doctrine teach you against that? You're supposed to keep the Sabbath, now you're going on a Sunday. You say, yeah, but I don't believe that. I prefer to do that, but if there's nothing else, then I'll have to go to another denomination. So even those who are in different Christian denominations, they don't hold everything. We don't find this in Islam. You don't find people doing this. So is a danger in society today when people are stopping to believe in the church doctrines. They're stopping to believe in what the Bible is actually teaching and just coming up with their own thing altogether. So the idea of this whole remarriage, idea of remarrying, is a doctrine that came into the church around about the 16th century. Even the Protestants started doing it because there was a man who wanted to remarry and remarry and remarry. And so we see that this idea of marrying and remarrying, getting divorced and remarrying, is unbiblical, not to be found in the pages of the Bible. It's against the supposed words of God as found in the New Testament. And it is a practice that in fact makes you an apostate, makes you outside of the fold of Christianity. If a person divorces, he must not come back. He is rejected, according to the Bible. So we can look at Mark chapter 10, verse 9, Luke 16, verse 17 and 18, where we'll find verses relating to the fact that you are not permitted to get divorced. You're not permitted to get remarried. I'm not going to go through all of that because we are looking at doctrine. We're not specifically looking at verses. So what does the church practice these days? The church practices divorce freely. If you want to get divorced, no one actually even cares. No one even bothers to ask. Did the Bible teach or condone any of these changes taking place in the modern church today? No, it didn't. Is there anything that we can find that somewhere along the line, one of the newer versions of the Bible said it's okay? No. Even with all these different translations, it is not permissible. Did the Bible somehow change to allow sin to be acceptable because you are saved by grace? Does the Bible anywhere say that when you are saved by grace, according to the Christian doctrine, that it is now permissible to get divorced? No. Even if you're saved by grace, according to the Christians, accept Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior, all your previous sins will be washed away, and you start a brand new man. And because before I became a Christian, I got divorced, therefore it's acceptable. No, still not acceptable. Even if you got divorced before you became a Christian, it's not acceptable. Let alone those people are professing Christians and then get a divorce. So the idea of divorce is nowhere to be accepted in the pages of the Bible. In fact, in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8 and 9, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8 and 9, it says, Jesus Christ, or God, depending on how you want to interpret it from a Christian perspective, is the same yesterday and today and forever. He does not change. He does not get moved. His teachings remain constant. So if he said that it's not permissible, it's not permissible. Before you converted or after you converted, it's still not permissible. You still cannot get divorced and remarry according to the Bible itself. So how did the modern church manage to change this doctrine without anybody noticing or anybody bothering? Now, if we look at it, it is rather strange that even the Catholic Church hasn't brought to the attention of the world that the Protestants are doing this and that it is against the teachings of the Bible. Why haven't the Catholics done this? Because they've got so many scriptures and so many verses that if they dared to do that, the Protestants could throw back 1,000 and show these are the doctrines that you guys are believing that are not biblical. So it's a silent activity between these two. We won't say anything about you, you don't say anything about us. It's like dirty politics. So you'll find a couple of Protestants that will attack some of the doctrines of Catholicism, but they won't attack everything because they know if we attack those specific ones, they will just play the same game with you. And so it's dirty politics. So when we look at this idea of divorce, it is something that is not biblical. So dear Christians, that's all the time. Dear Muslims, that's all the time we have for today. Think about these things. Join us again next time, same place, same time, as we go further into the doctrines that are not biblical. So from me, Areeb Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.